I think. Is this Mike from around the world?
Yes, it is, Pastor Paul. How you doing this evening?
I'm doing wonderful, Mike. It's so good to hear your voice and to know you're out there and everything. Doing good tonight, I pray.
Very good. I'm doing all right. All right. How about yourself?
Doing great. So, Mike, you said, we got to watch Italy. So guess what? Stromboli just blowed its top, and I mean big time, 73,000 feet into the air, ash and plume, and I mean this is the second time it's erupted in 6 weeks. And while that's going on, Mike, we've got Cascadia, the subduction zone with a 6.3 earthquake, and we got a hurricane headed to Florida. Mike, what's going on?
Yeah, we do. Hopefully that there's a high pressure system on the East Coast that'll be drifting across the East Coast. If that high pressure system goes out to sea, there'll be no resistance to that hurricane.
So when you say there'll be no resistance, so you're saying basically that then there's this, will this thing just get bigger, or will it just come faster, or what does that mean?
It'll gain power, speed up its course. So right now it's being resisted by a high pressure system going through the U.S. on the coming right through the East Coast. That high pressure system is also picking up speed, so I'm not sure as far as the time is concerned how long it's going to be on the East Coast, but if it continues to accelerate and goes out of certain regions, because it should go right across Ohio, Indiana, West Virginia, going out to sea. If it does that, there'll be nothing holding back that hurricane.
So I guess my question is, they're predicting right now that it's headed right for Melbourne, Florida. Not far from Daytona Beach area. It's going right toward Melbourne, and it's supposed to be a Category 3. It could even be as high as a Category 4 when it hits. And will it go right across Florida into the Gulf of Mexico, do you think?
Well, it's hard to tell. If the high-pressure system picks up speed, it's going to force that hurricane westward, which means it will veer further west than usual. If that high-pressure system ends up looping and going northward, going out to sea northward, that hurricane has enough momentum to go right up through Florida.
Oh, that would even be worse, because it would just destroy. That could destroy. That could hit Pensacola, maybe, or maybe,
sure could.
Or Jacksonville could be in danger, and then you're talking right on into Georgia.
Sure it could. If that high pressure system veers north, and that should be the system that everybody watches. Right now, it's the only system that can halt that hurricane. If it were to stop right now, there'd be no way that hurricane could ever come through Florida. But of course, it's on the move, and so as that's being tracked, if it goes, it has a eastward track right now. But if it picks up a northeastern track, we're going to have that hurricane can just run freely north. If it is not, it's going to force it to go westward.
Mike, I got to give Brock a lot of credit, because 9 days ago there was this storm was out there just off the coast of Africa, and there was like 4 little storms. They were kind of all around each other, and he looked at it and said, "Dad, I think that what we're looking at is something this is going to organize. It's going to become a storm and head straight to Florida." And I said, "Well, yeah, I mean, it could, but in this hurricane season, but look, it's 4 separate unorganized storms." He goes, "We should warn the people." I believe he was getting a prophetic word, because here we are 9 days later, and nobody saw this coming, and it's dangerous, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and good for him. Good for him for that spiritual advice. Pastor Paul, in this day, science is going to be turned up on its head, because most people are relying upon this empirical evidence to have to speak something, right? If more believers like Brock would speak out with those spiritual unctions, that could really save lives. I believe that that's just like the waters are, what are they, 14 degrees higher than normal in that region. Any storms that are in that region of the Earth that are in the South Atlantic, they can pick up quite a bit of momentum. We're talking about something close to a superstorm forming, and I wouldn't be surprised if one would form within a month's time. But yeah, those waters are producing quite a few turbulent type things going on. And not to mention the pressure differentials between the western and northern hemispheres of the Earth are causing a real problem going around the rim of the Earth. And science, some of the methods that are being used now in the modeling systems, even the European models, are not going to work with those type variables because they're not actually accounted for.
Did you say that the ocean waters are 14 degrees warmer than normal?
Yeah, in certain areas of the water is 14 degrees higher than normal. It's hotter than normal in certain areas, and it's a few traveling masses of water that's incredibly warm. It's just incredibly warm, and it's moving all over the place. One of the regions right now spans from the African continent to South America, and in that region, it touches both Africa in the southern sections of Africa to South America. It's 14 degrees hotter. There's another one developing in the South Pacific Ocean, and so those warmer waters are going to cause what I'm coining a superstorm. They're going to start producing superstorms, and that will be basically a supercharged hurricane or a supercharged typhoon or something of that nature.
Mike, first, folks, I want to say welcome all of you at YouTube. Over 4,200 of you with us here live tonight. Mike from around the world is joining us tonight. We're certainly talking about three very considerable big stories as far as climate affected, maybe by Nibiru, Planet X, the pole shifts, whatever. We've got a major hurricane, Hurricane Dorian, headed straight for Florida. Could be a Category 3 or 4 when it hits. And as Mike's explaining, if the low pressure system, if it doesn't stay in there and help resist this thing, it could be catastrophic for Florida. Meanwhile, Mike, look, the subduction zone, Cascadia. Can we talk about that before we go to Italy? 6.3, very, very shallow. It was only 4 miles deep. This could have been a tsunami. Scientists are stunned it wasn't. They're calling this a slow slip, which is even more dangerous. It doesn't mean that this earthquake relief pressure, but according to the seismologist, that this means it's slowly slipping, about ready to go, means it's going to intensify the pressure. What is your take on it? Is this part of what Nibiru or Planet X, is this part of the pressure the 5 waves of energy is causing?
Absolutely. In fact, I believe that with the introduction of more and more radioactive particles, we're going to see a lot more activity. And on our West Coast, one of the watchable regions right now with the West Coast would be right there at the border of India and China. Now, I know that sounds odd, but that's a watch area. Italy, my heart's kind of going out to Italy because Rome faces a real danger, but you really can't warn the people about that until the signs appear, in which case it's going to be it's pretty difficult to evacuate that large amount of people like that. Same thing with the West Coast, specifically with on the border of India and China. There's a very active region there that has lost quite a bit of mass in between the plates. The West Coast is tied to that plate between India and China. The Coast plate, which is south of all the Californian, that landlock right there. If that begins to drift, it will loosen just about every plate out there. But India and China seem to be one of those warning bells that we have a very massive instability in the crust of the Earth, which will eventually the Earth will it's because it's in motion. This loss of mass in the Middle East is going to cause some severe problems with all the plates, basically. So that means, if I'm correct in this, Australia, is about to have a volcanic problem, because unlike other plates, theirs are directly tied to a lot of magma. It also means that portions of Pakistan they're going to see them in Kazakhstan will see more activity as far as earthquakes are concerned. And it also means in places like Mongolia, going up into those areas, there will be some type heat bloom that will cause massive temperature swings in that region. So all these things are tied in together, and all of it's due to an induction of radiation causing just hyperactivity in the Earth. I'm as far as gravitational pull, I'm not sure about that. That's an obvious thing. But radiation itself, the readings are going up. And if global warming were to be explained in truth, I think that the findings would be a little different than what most people believe. I really do. I believe that global warming is a product of the introduction of more and more radioactive particles coming into all the different celestial bodies. I believe that's what's happening. I do not believe it's avoidable. There's nothing nobody can do to change it. But what we can do is prepare ourselves for the geological changes that will take place, that have always taken place. For example, Pastor Paul, we have 4 seasons. Do we not? We are familiar with those 4 seasons. We're not familiar with some of the larger seasons. Maybe a season that happens every 500 years, maybe one that happens every 1,500 years, so on and so forth. Because we're born in a lifetime where we do experience the 4 seasons, so we're used to that. But we're not used to the bigger ones. And we're at the precipice right now of a larger cyclical season, which is very damaging. The cycle of the rise and fall of civilizations, it follows more than these bigger cycles, but some of the smaller ones, right? Some of the smaller cycles that come around, they really do damage. But now we have a culmination of not only some of the smaller cycles that have been charted out, but some of the bigger ones too, all happening at one time, right? It will be like all of our 4 seasons hitting it all at one time in one specific portion of the earth. In this case, all of these cyclical seasons, these cycles that the earth goes through, they're all culminating into this era right now. So we could potentially go through all of them all at one time. And I believe that has already begun. The proof of that is something external. The heat, there are some heat signatures going up outside of the heliosphere, big time, which implies something is closer than once perceived. I do believe that the time of observation for everybody is soon at hand. So some of how people look at the stars are going to notice that certain ones are not placed right, which will validate the fact that the earth is actually beginning to move when it wants to, it's going to seem like, because it's not going to be by anybody's calendar. It's going to be by sheer celestial mechanics, but in a very wacky nature.
Mike, when you talk about all these different plates are going to be moving, and that when you made a comment there that the seasons, or like we're going to be literally we're going to be seeing all the seasons happening at the same time. It won't be like we have now. I was just thinking about that because in Spain, I don't know if Brock, if you still got pictures, but we had this insane hailstorm. The hail was a foot high. After it got done falling, it created this incredible deluge of a flash flood of hail rushing through the streets of Madrid, carrying away cars and everything. I mean, we're talking late August, a hailstorm of biblical proportion. We had a sinkhole swallowing a home in Florida. We have the volcano Stromboli in Italy blowing its top. The subduction zone, Cascadia subduction zone at the coast of Oregon at 6.3, and a hurricane headed to Florida we didn't even see coming, and it might just tear the whole thing apart. I mean, this is a lot of and monsoon rains and mudslides, but hail, I understand hail falls at all times of year, but weird stuff. I mean, are you saying this is really all part of this Nibiru, Planet X, that's affecting the pole shifts, the wobble, the earth is wobbling. So can you address, and I want to talk about Jupiter in a minute here, but can you go tell us a little bit more about why there's an island. Let me just say this, Mike. In the last week, we had an island that formed out of nowhere, and it's 20,000 football fields in size, and it just went floating past the islands of Vanuatu, and it's headed to Australia. I mean, it's not staying. It's a volcano-created island, but it's not going to stay where it's at. It's headed toward Australia. What in the world's going on? What's that about?
Well, Pastor Vol, we talked about that as something people should look for, right?
Yeah.
In one of these broadcasts, I believe I said that people shouldn't be surprised if they see islands forming like that pretty fast.
Yeah.
But it's volcanic in nature, because underneath the waters, we can't observe that, we can't see that, and that's where most of the volcanoes are. It is incredibly active underneath the water, right? Just recently, I believe 2 days ago, they had a large, I don't know if it's been reported, but there were some animals that died, but they were cooked. They were really cooked. These are fish that dwell deep in the ocean. They were severely cooked. So with that type of activity, because fish do not normally, they don't commit suicide by going into heat plumes underneath the ocean, right?
No, they're going to run away.
Most of the crustaceans, so on and so forth, when you're dealing with these volcanic tubes underneath the ocean, they can withstand temperatures up to 600 degrees, so they're just not going to cook themselves like that. But we have a problem underneath the ocean, again, due to large amounts of activity, and because it's underneath the ocean, because people are going to begin to see, especially if they're fishermen or something of that nature, they'll begin to observe just steam coming out of the ocean, smoke coming out of the ocean in several places. I'm looking for three volcanic eruptions that people will see with their eyes. They'll hear about it, be on the news, pretty large ones, that will happen in the ocean, not on the land, but in the ocean, that will send ash and everything else up in the air from the ocean floor, which will also shoot up magma materials, forming yet another island, but this one will be active. So we're going to observe this happening all over the place. There are certain formations, like around Italy and the Aegean Sea and places like that. They have a real problem, in the Malta, Mediterranean Sea, Cyprus, and all those different places around Italy, Greece, you name it. They're going to have a big problem because the activity in that region underneath the ocean is off the scales, and it's really beginning to, it's going to cause a problem. One of the things that pains me is that not many people, anything large scale like that, people are not going to believe, right? Without just a load of credible evidence. They have to have evidence. Unfortunately, not enough time to gather that evidence, and no one's going to take the risk of presenting that to disrupt certain agencies or upset anybody. Not to mention, with the political climate, everybody's going to try and use everything for an agenda. So the real warnings are going to be missed. But when you're looking at 40, 50 miles of land that people occupy, and something has happened to it, that's going to really scare people. Yeah. So hopefully these conversations will alert people that yes, changes are taking place, but they're not it's not the end of the world. It's not some weird change. Don't go kill yourself or anything like that.
No.
The Lord informed us about these changes. And all we're doing is tracking these changes, because certain Christians are going to see these changes. And when it comes to their front door, they're going to say, well, I thought this would never happen. They shouldn't ever say that. All of us are going to go through changes. We're not going to be destroyed by them. We're not going to be condemned by it. I'm not worried about them, because the Lord controls all of that. I don't believe like other people do, especially they believe every storm is sent by heart. I can't believe that.
No.
Because I've heard them try and disrupt storms, and it didn't work. It just won't work. Anyway, but
well, Mike, things
are happening all over the place. There's like right now, if I could, I would warn Rome. Is exactly what I would do.
Well, Rome needs to listen, Mike, as you're saying, because there's and because seriously, Italy is setting on a counter. I mean, literally a fault line, a situation that's going to be absolutely catastrophic. And that word is over. I'm not even using that word. It's not even. There's got to be a bigger word than that. I mean, this is going to be insane. It's almost the extinction of that area. I mean, it's just going to be over. It's coming. And I think people need to be aware of this. Folks, there's 4,700 people. Can you guys do me a favor? Can everybody hit the like button right now? Hit the like button, because by doing that, you'll drive the algorithms up, which means they'll send us out a little bit more to possible other people to watch. It's unbelievable what we're going up against. It's a miracle this many people come here tonight, but I know folks are hungry to hear the truth, and we're so glad Mike from around the world has joined us tonight. There's some very powerful stuff. And while you're hitting the like button, Brock, give us 30 seconds. How can people order that Heavens Are Shaking DVD that we had from Cincinnati? Let's take 30 Released from Cincinnati, a 4-part DVD set on the end times. Planet X, Nibiru, The Seas Rising, The Pole Shift, Clyde Lewis, John Moore, Stephen Ben-Danoon, and myself, bringing forth dynamic information relevant to the last day. You can get this 4-part DVD set at my website or individually at my Patreon channel. The heavens are shaking. This is a must-see. Get it now. Yes, if you haven't gotten that DVD, that's 4 DVDs actually. It's 4 hours. The pole shifts are explained there by John Moore, and all the secret file that came from NASA scientists that Stephen Ben-Danoon got. All of that, Clyde Lewis, all of it, my message, all of it's powerful. Now, Mike, let's talk about Jupiter again. Brock has brought up a very powerful thing, and we've been talking about it here today. That, and you've probably already known this, the scientists have been looking for Planet X. I mean, you got NASA scientist Mike Brown and his sidekick, Sebastian. They're sitting out there in Honolulu, and they've been staring at that observatory every night looking for the elusive Planet X. While looking for it, they've been looking around Jupiter and looking for Planet X. They found 12 new moons around Jupiter. They've given them 12 new names, and now Jupiter, it's official, has, instead of 67 moons, there's now officially 79 moons that we know of that are orbiting Jupiter. Now, they've also said today that Jupiter, one day in Jupiter takes 9 hours compared to 24 hours here on Earth. Jupiter is much bigger than Earth, but it's spinning at an extremely faster speed with 79 moons orbiting it. But here's the clincher. I didn't know this. It's what's called the barycenter. And folks, we're showing it to you on the screen right there. You've got the sun, and then way out there you see Jupiter, but Jupiter doesn't really orbit the sun. Jupiter and the sun both kind of like dance around the barycenter of the sun, which is just off from the sun. So that's a game changer, but that's part of the reason why they keep looking in that area where Jupiter is. It's creating, they're saying that something's causing now the sun to wobble now, and it's not Jupiter. So it's got to be a binary system or something large gravitational pull. So Mike, can you speak to this understanding? How important is Jupiter, and what all does this mean if something bigger than the sun and Jupiter is entering into our solar system, or at least on the outskirts of it? Is this going to mess up the whole ball of wax?
Now we're having a conversation. Okay, the Jupiter itself, right? I'll call it the gatekeeper, is what it is. Okay. Actually, in ancient text, it was literally called that, the gatekeeper. The sun and Jupiter, they do have some. If we were to put them on Earth, we call that a fulcrum. So they have a balanced point in between them, right?
Yeah.
Very balanced point.
Yes.
But based upon all the modeling, right? Based upon all the modeling, especially those down with the supercomputers beginning in the 80s, there was a part missing. There's a third object. There's no way Jupiter and the sun, based upon the mathematics we have now, right, can stay in balance without a third object, because there's still forces, there's still movements, there's still inertia that's unaccounted for, yet it's maintained. The only way that can happen is by what's been observed so far, which is a tritary system or or not a binary, but a system with three suns, right? I like that term with two suns because that makes it simple. But when you're talking, now that you're getting into Jupiter, now that someone finally has, why does it always take the private industry to bring something out like this out? Who knows? Anyway, these guys in this conversation about Jupiter and the sun, that needs to go further. I'll tell you why. Because we're going to find that the perturbations are made up by a massive object out there that's a little smaller than our sun, but the mass must be enormous. Now, because I personally believe this is true, Jupiter is also losing some of its material because there is a stream, and the astronomers are going to begin to find a stream, and they're not going to know where that stream is going from Jupiter, right? It is a visible stream. Now, as this continues and things heat up, they're going to be able to see it because they may not have the equipment right now to see temperatures that low. So they'll be able to see it as things heat up. When they do see it, it's going to point to another object out there. It's going to point directly to it. But in fact, as this other object is closer, it's going to continue to disrupt. Now, with mathematics, every year that you take an observation, you have a change in the formula, right? Which means you have to adjust numbers. Over the course of years, if those numbers are adjusted exponentially but perfectly, then we know that something out there is acting on both the sun.
So that's why they
Jupiter.
know.
And this is what's being picked up. So they can't. They're coming to the point where they can't hide this. Now, the material exchange in any system with two or more suns is something that is undeniable to all people because, in fact, the speeds are so fast by these objects as they come into focus that a third sun, if we had not a third, but our second sun, if it came into our system, we would see it as a small, tiny dot, not something big and huge, right?
Right,
a small, tiny dot. But it would be so fast that within a 72-hour period, it will be detected, and 72 hours later, it will be on its way out. But it will also take the material from our sun. Hear me on this, because in every single system they have observed this. It'll take the material from our sun, almost like it's recharging itself. All the photons, whether they be those in the spectrum that we can see, or those not in the spectrum, which is light, it will absorb all of it as it's swinging on its way out, which means our sun will not emit light anywhere. Then light will return as a red haze. In fact, it'll begin as a red haze, and it will end as a red haze. And in all systems with more than one sun, there's always a layer of iron floating in the atmosphere, some type of iron dust. So before it arrives, we're going to see the iron dust, right? Before that is actually detected, we're going to see that iron dust. So yet again, people will see prophecy come to light when they see a type of resin, a type of gooey material that's red, dropping with the rain, right, interrupting water sources and everything else. They'll see it. It will just get all over the place in the oceans, in the streams, in the waters. Everything is going to have this is going to be laden with this arsenic and iron. But this will be right before this other object makes its closest approach to our sun and goes right back out. Now, every single sun has a system. Every single sun has a system. And this year and last year, something curious has been happening. Now, I have to mention this. You know how they say, well, we've got meteors from Mars on the Earth.
Right,
or they say, well, we've got meteors on Earth that have landed on Mars. I don't know how they come up with this, and they don't either. They're just saying this. But let me give you the truth behind that.
All right.
Because I think it's quite foolish for someone to pick up a rock on Earth, never having been to Mars, to say it has to be from Mars. That's foolish.
Yeah.
We can't fall for that. Simply because they can account for certain materials, right?
Okay.
Simply because lab experiments and will say that these materials form in this type of environment. So that's kind of foolish. What they have been finding out is the exotic materials are bound within the asteroid belt. Right? Materials that are proposed not to be from our solar system are in the asteroid belt.
In the Kuiper belt.
That tells you that.
Are you talking? Are you're saying in the Kuiper belt? That,
well, I'm going to call it the asteroid belt just to simplify things, because we actually have three now. They detected three, but anyway, there are rocks and materials in that belt that are not supposed to be there. They're not indigenous to this solar system. And that's why people are looking at things out in space now, big long rocks, saying, well, they must be spaceships or something of that nature, right?
Right.
But
no.
they have found materials in that belt that are not, they mathematically, by way of physics and observations, they couldn't have been formed in our solar system. There's no way in the world. They're bound to differently, right? Which requires a whole different set of specifications, light, radiation exposure, gravity, all sorts of things, which is not found in our solar system.
So
something has been coming in here, leaving debris around, and Jupiter has been capturing quite a bit of it. Every time it comes in, Jupiter could capture that and protecting the Earth and everything else from being, pummeled to pieces.
So, Mike, let's just say that so mathematically they know that the things that are happening to the sun, the things that are happening to the Earth, the things that are being detected in the asteroid belt, the things that are happening to Jupiter can't be happening unless there's a third object that's creating a pressure, a pull, a reaction. Because with every action, there's a reaction. So mathematically, they know it's going to enter. And it's not going to be here long, is it? It's going to, as it's swinging by, it's going to enter and out. Are you talking, it's maybe a 3-day deal, but it could create unbelievable, catastrophic events to the planet Earth?
Of course. And before it ever gets to that point, right? Before it gets to that point, we're going to notice, all right, here's what is proposed, right? Because I've a long time ago, when they first really seriously began to look at celestial mechanics, and they had computers to back it up with, NASA noticed, right, before NASA was really a notable agency, they noticed they had to alter the formulas for even the orbit of the moon. They had to alter the formulas for the orbit of the Earth. They had to alter formulas for the orbits of all the planets. Now, these guys have to get it right, because when you're navigating in space, you have to have some pretty precise calculations. So they had to continue to make adjustments to the formula. Then about 10 years later, they found out, wait a minute, these adjustments are constant, which means you have to make the same adjustments, right? Now, it's all keyed into our position, right? In parallel to that of the constellation, right? Now I'm talking about positioning. So if our positioning as a solar system changes, so does the formula, which means the perturber is outside of the influence of our solar system. And they knew this from the beginning. Even when they sent the first spacecrafts out, Voyagers, they noticed perturbations that they couldn't account for mathematically. And so they utilized what's called a ghost constant, something that would change in its value every so often based on some other mathematical formulas. So they knew they had a missing object. So now here's what's funny. If you put a third object into the simulation, right, every single calculation is precise. There's no need to adjust anything. Even the orbit of satellites, right, that adjustment that the microprocessing units make, even that small adjustment need not be made. If you put the other object into the formulas, into the simulations, all the mathematics work out. Now, figure that one out. See, so but they don't. They know that if they put that in there, and you have to think of this wisely. You can't really blame them, because they know if they put that in there, somebody would say, "Wait a minute. Anything with more than one sun has a point where the two suns meet together." And that means very massive destructive changes for any planet they may orbit around these systems. And that's why they never, ever want to tell it. Because in every single observation, they have noticed the same thing. Destruction, massive destruction. So if you have one sun, no destruction. More than one sun, you're going to have guaranteed destruction.
Yeah,
so
Mike.
Two suns orbiting each other are going to make a close flyby every so often.
All right. Now, Mike, I'm going to ask you another question in just a moment. This has to do with Apophis. Before I do, folks, we have a brand new DVD out. It's a 2-part DVD. It's called The Signs of His Coming. And we talk about some of this in there along with a lot of other stuff. Here's how you get that. You should order that now because it's going to be shipping next week. Brock, show them how. A brand new DVD set on the signs of his coming. We took a very extensive look at the prophecies in the book of Matthew, chapter 24, and how they play out across the Bible. The signs of his coming takes a strong look at the comparison of the days of Noah to the coming of Jesus Christ. Are you ready for the signs, and do you understand he's coming soon? Get it at my website right now. Mike, let me just say this to you. Apophis is coming on Friday the 13th, April the 13th, 2029. That's 9.5 years from now. Are we going to encounter the Planet X effect before Apophis? And if so, does that affect Apophis's trajectory that's headed this way?
Well, that's a good question. So what if we don't? What if we just amazingly, right, against everything, we didn't experience any type of issues from celestial happenings? Apophis, the way it has to come into our solar system, it's going to run into some debris, right?
Yeah.
It has to run into debris. They understand this, they know this. They're not going to give too many details right now about it because it's so far out. I believe they still have the estimate at 340 meters wide.
340 meters wide.
Okay.
And
still the estimate. That's not the estimate I saw. In fact, some of the data that is out there is very conflicting. I believe they're doing this because it's so far out there.
Well, wait a minute.
Right?
What did you see? I mean, you saying this thing's bigger than that?
Well, I saw it when they first discovered Apophis, right? They jotted down some facts and figures, and as it came closer, NASA did some very close observations of it, and so they store some data. All of a sudden, about maybe a day or two later, all that data changed. All of it did. And then that's when people began to become concerned because they said, well, are we going to be hit by this thing, this, and the other? And then, of course, everybody began to look at the data. But something changed in the data. Initially, that's not what I saw. Initially, I saw something of a different makeup. Right, it's still a rocket, but of a different makeup, a bit larger than 340 meters wide, possibly it has a different trajectory than what I'm seeing now too. So, but anyway, we'll see that. Well,
let me say that in 2004 they publicly let it slip that the Apophis had a 2.7% chance of deep impact. And then they came back a little bit later and said, no, wait a minute, it's going to barely miss us. And now they're telling us it's going to scrape by at only 18,600 miles, which is inside the satellites, which are around 22,000 miles around the Earth. So, I mean, it's probably going to smack some asteroids on the way through. I mean, so the data is moving here. Did you see something like that 2.7, or did you see something even a higher probability maybe?
Well, imagine this, Pastor Paul. Imagine you're in the middle of an earthquake, right? You're standing in the middle of a baseball field. Now I say, hey, Pastor Paul, I'm going to throw this ball to you. Okay. And it's gonna land right in your glove. You need not move a thing, but you're in the middle of an earthquake, so you're moving all over the place. But I'm going to throw it right in your glove. You're in the middle of an earthquake? I don't think so. All the components through those calculations are moving. They're in motion. There's no way in the world anybody right now can make a calculation of something so far out and say, well, it's going to skim by us. Here's a better way to think of that.
Okay.
If it's in proximity to the Earth, period, there's enough. There's enough of a wobble in our solar system that something that could be 1,000 miles away, 20,000 miles away, due to the movement of our entire solar system, can hit us Okay, we could actually shift that much. It's very hard to detect the motion of an entire solar system because we're in the solar system. But these other objects, right, they're going to be affected by it. So they've made this mistake before. Some of these impacts that we've been having, right, they were actually documented as being, one of them was documented as being 240,000 miles away from the Earth. However, it did come into the atmosphere. They are penetrating the atmosphere. But a week prior to them penetrating the atmosphere, they were calculated as being 240,000 miles off target. So how can that mistake be made there? When you're tracking things that have a different origin, and they don't follow the celestial motion of our solar system, you have a problem, right? Because something is coming into a moving target. So it's very difficult to have accurate calculations, especially that far out. So what I'm telling you is this year they're going to have a new set. They have to have new data. Next year they have to have new data. They have to have new data. You can't go by the data they had, 5 years ago. That's impossible.
All right.
You can't do that.
All right. So
not to mention, there are too many people who are. You have one group of folks who are trying to push and shove things out to the public because they're. I'll put it this way: Apophis is one thing, all right, but there's some other dangers because prior to that thing ever getting here, I do believe that people are going to change their mind about us being in a binary system or maybe a system with more than one sun.
Well,
in fact, I can almost stake my life on it. They're going to change.
Well, that's my question. That was my question is, and you almost stake your life on it, that we're gonna have an issue with the binary system or Planet X, Nibiru, whatever people want to call it, before even Apophis, and that's really important information. In other words, before Apophis, which we're watching closely, and obviously Elon Musk kind of let some stuff slip the other day when he said, guys, your underground cities aren't going to work for you because you're either going to drown from the pole shift or you're going to melt from the magma. So the only hope you got is to get off the planet. And then they tried to say, well, what are you talking about? Are you talking about Apophis or what are you talking about? And then he said, well, I'm clarifying that there's some things happening out there that what you're trying to do is not going to work. Well, what's that mean? So, I mean, I think, sometimes he lets some stuff slip maybe. But are you saying, Mike, that before Apophis gets here, we're going to have some other bigger problems?
Yeah, I really don't think anybody's going to worry about Apophis. That may be an additional worry, but I believe that people are going to be, they're going to have enough to contend. We're going to have enough to contend with. We're looking at a destabilization of Earth's crust is what we're looking at. Now, with that, we're also looking at a very deep type or very huge swing in weather phenomena, right, from the norm. I mean a huge swing, which Pastor Paul is going to do this. It will increase our wind speeds dramatically. Now is the time where the wind speeds are going to be they're going to start to build, right? They're going to really begin to build because the extremes between hot and cold are outrageous. They're outrageous. And in certain places, the water temperature is totally outrageous. A 14-degree temperature jump in the South Atlantic and several different spots is enormous. That's enough to really drive some very strange weather phenomena. This, in conjunction with our plate problem, the magma problem, and global warming's real culprit, which is radiation, with the introduction of more radioactive material coming into the Earth, and the Earth emitting more gamma rays than ever before now, and pulses. And then we have it was last week, there was actual plasma was observed being sustained for a few seconds that was discharged without a storm, hitting the ground and staying there. So with all these things happening, they're going to increase. It's going to destabilize some things. Then you have the human mind, right? Now, here's one thing people don't know. Galactic cosmic rays are penetrating our magnetosphere because we have some very weak spots in the magnetosphere. When they do penetrate the magnetosphere, they're hitting people. They're hitting people every single day. Now, you know what happens when something like that hits a person? They'll never feel it. They won't even know what happened. But what it will do is knock it'll take their cells and knock the DNA loose in their cells. It will cut the DNA in half. You know what that's called? Cancer. When you have a cell that begins to mutate because the instructions are all messed up, and then it won't shut itself off, right? Because all cells, if they begin to deform, they receive a signal from the body to shut themselves off or self-destruct. Cancer cells, they won't shut themselves off. They won't self-destruct. They begin to multiply. They won't listen to anything in the body, and they begin to take over. So you're looking at a severe increase in cancer rates. But not only that, you're looking at now, because you're being exposed to so much radiation, and that really should be in people's minds. It really should follow how much radiation they're being exposed to. But the auroras are going to tell that story. Because, ladies and gentlemen, when you see an aurora, what that is a high-speed collision taking place in the atmosphere. It's just like CERN, just like the Hadron Collider. So when you see auroras over places like Mexico, the United States, and Canada, going all the way down to parts of Africa that they shouldn't be in other words, covering the north and southern hemisphere, when you see this, I know it's going to be pretty for the clouds, but it's also going to let you know that we have high-speed particles penetrating flesh, right? Penetrating flesh. And Pastor, it's so funny. You know what happens if you don't have protection from that, right? If it's in any given concentration. If you don't have protection, you go blind. That's a concern with the astronauts. That's why we have to mimic the Earth's magnetic field around every single craft or every single ship that will take them into orbit. Because if you don't, the neurons in their brains will begin to separate. They'll part. They'll just split apart, and people go mad. They act like animals. But blindness is one of the traits from that also.
Mike, okay, folks, seriously, Mike around the world's with us from Council of Time. I think we're getting some tremendous information here. It's helping us understand what we're up against. And Mike, I want to, before we let you go here, I want to be sure that we can get you rescheduled. This thing is getting so intense. I'm not the next couple Thursday night, so I won't be available due to the fact I've got my son coming in and my granddaughter, and they're going to be here in our home, but we're pretty busy. I want to know if we can book you for 3 weeks from tonight on September the 19th. Can we get you back here on a Thursday night, 10 o'clock?
Let's see, I believe the whole month of September should be September 19th. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great, Mike. Well, who knows what?
We might be talking about Australia when we get back, but that'll be good.
Let's just wait till 3 weeks and see if we're talking about Australia. All right, folks, you heard it. Mike around the world. Mike, thank you so much for being with us tonight. It's been a very informative broadcast, maybe one of the best ever. Wow. Thank you so much. God bless and be safe. God bless. Mike around the world, folks. Mike from around.